everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, back again with some more exciting wrestling news. Lots of news to talk about today. It's our second installment of news today as well. Tom already did one earlier on, which you can see on this very channel. But without any further ado, let's take a look at those headlines. More recently released WWE Superstars have teased a debut in Impact Wrestling. Next up, Cody Rhodes has commented about WWE's NXT Great American Bash shows coming up very soon. And finally, we take a look at the reason behind Bray Wyatt's recent absence from TV. So let's talk about Impact Wrestling and the very close relationship they seem to have with various, quite a large chunk actually, of recently released WWE Superstars. So we've already seen reports that the club, Anderson and Gallows, may well have signed with Impact Wrestling, and also we've seen Deonna Purrazzo already make several appearances in Impact, and she's even secured herself a Knockouts title shot for Slammiversary. And there have been various teasers from the likes of Eric Young, for example. EC3's been putting out some cryptic stuff without explicitly referring to Impact. In fact, none of these have explicitly referred to Impact Wrestling as their likely destination, but you know, there are various reasons to believe that. In the case of Eric Young and EC3, it's to do with their history with that promotion. But this news piece is not about EC3 and Eric Young, but two newer revelations from recently released WWE Superstars. The wrestlers in question are, well, first of all, let's talk about Heath Slater, who recently uploaded a video on his social media of him training, working out, with the date on it, July 18th, which is, of course, the date of Slammiversary. Now you might be thinking, why would Impact be a likely destination for Heath Slater? Well, there are two reasons really. One, Rhino's there, he was his tag partner and co-tag team champion in WWE, remember? And secondly, Impact have referred to this themselves. In a backstage segment a couple of weeks ago now, Rhino mentioned that he already has a tag partner, referring, of course, presumably, to Heath Slater, but it wasn't said out loud, it was just heavily implied. Now, Rhino isn't currently on the Slammiversary card, but there are still a couple of weeks until the event itself, and also, you don't necessarily need to be on the card to appear on the show, and also, these rumoured debuts don't have to happen at Slammiversary itself. Of course, they would have a bigger impact, no pun intended, if they did so, but they could happen on a show before, to hype the pay-per-view, they could happen after it, to maintain interest after the pay-per-view, so I guess we'll just see where it goes. It's all very loose right now. But then again, of course, we do have to take into account the fact that Slater did have July 18th on his post, so that seems to imply a Slammiversary debut, doesn't it? And the second recently released WWE Superstar in question is the man of the hour himself, Lio Rush. And like Heath Slater, Lio Rush put a reference to a countdown or to a certain date or time in his video. His wasn't the date itself, his wasn't July 18th, but his was 20 days and then a countdown at the end of the video. Now, 20 days from the day that Lio Rush uploaded this to YouTube would be July 19th, which is obviously the day after Slammiversary, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But then I thought, hang on, I'm going off British time here, and when he uploaded the video, it may well have been 20 days before July 18th, Slammiversary. So there you go, Lio Rush and Heath Slater both joining the list of recently released WWE Superstars who seem pretty keen on teasing a move to Impact Wrestling. Several matches have already been announced for Slammiversary, which I ran through on the news video yesterday, and it looks to be a pretty stacked card. The biggest, of course, is the match for their vacant Impact World Championship, which has a mystery entrant. So it's a fatal four-way, but we only know 3 of the entrants who are regular Impact roster members. I think we could see a strong chance of that 4th mystery entrant being one of these mystery WWE releases. Moving swiftly on now to AEW/NXT. We're going to talk about Cody Rhodes' comments regarding NXT's Great American Bash. A brief bit of background here. So tonight and next Wednesday will be kind of 2 separate installments of the NXT Great American Bash. It seems to be a substitute for their usual takeover pay-per-views, or network specials, I should say, when there's no lockdown going on. But instead, they've split it into 2 weeks. They're doing it tonight and then next Wednesday as well. So Great American Bash week 1 and week 2. Now, this seems fine, but then when you look at what AEW are doing, it does seem like WWE are maybe copying them a little bit to stop them from getting a jump in the ratings. The reason is because before this NXT doubleheader was announced as the Great American Bash, AEW had announced Fyter Fest for, again, tonight and next Wednesday. And similarly, that is a kind of a replacement to the usual Fyter Fest pay-per-view. So we've got 2 weeks of NXT and AEW going head-to-head on TV, but with more pay-per-view style cards. Now obviously you may think that NXT doing this, especially after AEW had already announced that Fyter Fest would take this format, may have ruffled a few feathers. So let's see what Cody had to say. Speaking on Busted Open Radio, Cody pointed out that his father, the legendary Dusty Rhodes, named the Great American Bash. He said, "My dad always told me that Starrcade was for my sister and that the Great American Bash was for me. And obviously at the time he came up with these events, I'm not sure that was actually the case, but that's what he told me, and that's why it's very special to me and my sister." On WWE using the name for this NXT show going head to head with Cody's own show, he said, "I'm not going to get angry because it still brings up his name in a positive way. The marketing of the event reminds me a lot of what Disney currently does. If you go to Disney World, they still sell Haunted Mansion shirts and they're all done retro style. They market nostalgia." However, Cody did say, "I think our show is better. I think it will be better in execution, but I hope that they, NXT, do something special with it." Cody also built on this, saying, "I'm not upset about anything that brings my dad's name in a positive light. Is it a weird feeling? For sure, but I've also been in a tag match with my brother, competing ratings-wise against the Dusty Rhodes Classic, NXT's tag team tournament named after Dusty." He says, "One guy I never mind competing with is my own dad. I'll never mind that. And the Great American Bash, it is what it is. And I would hope they would do something positive with it." However, Cody also talked about WWE's use of the Starrcade name in recent years for relatively minor live events, considering the great lineage of these big Starrcade shows. And Cody said, "I hated what Michael Hayes did with Starrcade. He took a creation of my dad's and made it a live event because they weren't selling any tickets in North Carolina, and he wanted to save his job." Cody goes on, "That was the premier event of World Championship Wrestling and the NWA, and you did what you did with it. The same, I hope, is not what happens with the Great American Bash." So strong words there from Cody with regards to Starrcade, but in the case of the Great American Bash, he seems to be quite balanced about it because he argues it brings up his dad's name in a positive light, and also he doesn't mind competing with something named after his father. Sticking with AEW for just a second, let's talk about the possible formation or reformation of a legendary old stable. Now, it's no secret that FTR, Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler are heavily influenced by old school tag team wrestling. And since they've debuted in AEW, they've been flashing the forehand gesture. They've been taking pictures with Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, posting it all over social media. And it just seems a little bit too on the nose, doesn't it? I'm referring, of course, to the legendary Four Horsemen, that legendary stable of the NWA and later WCW as well, which really came to revolutionize wrestling. And indeed, FTR have been using moves popularized by the Brainbusters, Anderson and Blanchard's tag team back in the Four Horsemen, and it just all seems like they may be heading towards something. The final piece of this puzzle, or should I say the third piece of this four puzzle jigsaw, the next piece of the puzzle would be Cody Rhodes, because he recently mentioned in a promo, remember, alongside Arn Anderson, that he'd been feeling a little bit cut off from the Elite recently. Could this be a hint that he maybe wants to set up a new stable of his own? And finally, the most recent hint, the most recent tease or update towards this potential groundbreaking storyline would be when Cody and Dax Harwood were on Twitter celebrating each other's birthdays. Cody said, "Happy birthday, digging your truck looks like it has a lot of horsepower." Oh. Now in my mind, there are two things working against this. First of all, I think it could be a massive possibility and I would love to see it happen, but there are two things that I think means that it's not quite a foregone conclusion. One, wrestling and wrestlers love a bait and switch, don't they? They love working us bloody marks, don't they? And I think this could all be a tease and then they'll swerve us and do something a little bit different. My second point, which is more a point that really backs up the first, that this is a massive bait and switch, is that it just feels wrong to me to have Cody, a Rhodes, the son of Dusty Rhodes, leading a new incarnation of the Four Horsemen. Because they hated Dusty and they beat him up a lot, and Dusty beat them up a lot. And I know that Cody's affiliated with Arn Anderson now, who was a Horseman and everything, but I don't want to see Cody leading the Four Horsemen. In fairness, he's been phenomenal this year, and I have no doubt that he could pull it off really well. But what do you think? Do you think it's likely? Do you think it's all just a big ruse? Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Now, let's talk about some Raw ratings. That's right, it's bad news for the Raw ratings for this week's edition of Monday Night Raw, the 29th of June edition, because it brought in 1,735,000 viewers, which is way down from their overnight viewers they drew the previous week. Last week's show drew 1,922,000 overnight viewers, so that's a drop of like almost 200,000. Not only that, but it ties WWE's record low, which was also set earlier this year in the 3-hour era of Monday Night Raw. So what was the reason for this big drop-off this week? Was this week's show just horrendous or anything? No, I think it's more of just a natural decline from a previous relative 2-week high that Raw has been on. The reason I think for this is that 2 weeks ago, of course, it was the post-Backlash edition of Raw, so you get a little boost coming off the back of a network special, and then the week after that, they really pulled out all the stops for that Raw, with several titles being defended on the show. This week was a bit more of a return to normality, and as such, the rating has dipped again. It's worrying stuff, because if the return to normality is tying your record low for the 3-hour era of Monday Night Raw, yeah, things aren't quite right, are they? Now, you can attribute a lot of this to the whole lockdown era, the fact that the atmosphere is weird, there are no proper fans in attendance, and I understand that, and also maybe just the fact that wrestling itself is running out of momentum a little bit, but you kind of have to think of ways to try and switch it up, I guess. I don't know, I'm not a TV person. I don't know what they do. Hopefully, for WWE's sake, next week we see a little bit of a jump for Raw, a little bit of an improvement, or we could be seeing a new record low. And finally, over on SmackDown, we've recently seen Bray Wyatt return to the roster after a short time away. Wyatt was obviously feuding with the Universal Champion Braun Strowman heading into Money in the Bank, his former stablemate, of course. Strowman won that match after seemingly rejecting Wyatt's invitation to start the Wyatt family again to rejoin him, and Braun thought, no, I'd rather keep my belt and just beat him. After that, Wyatt disappeared for a little bit and has come back to reignite this feud with the Universal Champion. In the meantime, while Wyatt was away, Braun had this kind of time-killing mini feud with both The Miz and John Morrison, and eventually beat them in a handicap match at Backlash. Now, the reason for that seems to have been just to fill a bit of time until Bray Wyatt came back, and nobody realistically believed that Miz or Morrison could win that belt. But what was the reason for Bray Wyatt's absence? Well, according to the Wrestling Observer Radio, apparently it was to spend more time with his family because he and JoJo had just welcomed their second child into the world. And you can't blame Bray Wyatt for that, but it is nice to hear clarification of this, because in the current era, the current stuff going on everywhere with COVID-19 and everything, whenever someone's missing, you think the worst. You think, well, what's happened to them? Are they okay? What's wrong? Have they fallen out with the company for the way they're dealing this? Have they become ill themselves? But instead, no, he just wanted to spend more time with his new child, and that's completely fair enough, and a nice little positive end to this news video. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. Let me know what you thought of any of these stories in the comments section down below, and yeah, have a good day. Stay safe out there, stay positive, and I'll see you very soon.